Welcome back to The Explainer, everyone. Today, we are setting the stage for an absolutely epic journey through ancient Hispania, basically the area stretching right across modern-day Portugal and Spain. We're going to explore a fascinating and, honestly, a highly overlooked chapter of history that completely rewrites how we think about the fall of Rome and actually sets the early blueprint for medieval Europe.
We are talking about a 176-year forgotten empire here. You know, when we think about the groups that carved up the Roman Empire, we usually hear all about the Goths, the Vandals, or the Franks. But long before many of those heavy hitters laid down their permanent roots, there were the Suebi. This wandering coalition actually established what historians recognize as the very first independent Germanic successor state in all of Western Europe.
So, the big question. How exactly does a migrating coalition of tribes travel hundreds of miles just to capture a major strategic hub like modern-day Lisbon? It's kind of a massive historical mystery. And to understand how they pulled off this incredible military feat, we need to look at how they first arrived and snagged a foothold amidst the total chaos of a crumbling empire.
Let's start with Phase 1, the entry to peace, which runs from 409 to 438 AD. In the autumn of 409, this huge coalition breached the Pyrenees. By 411, they literally drew lots to divide up Rome's western provinces, with the Vandals. The Suebi ended up settling in the northwest province of Galicia and set up their capital in Bracara Augusta, which, if you've been to Portugal, you'd know today as Braga. But over the next few decades, man, they really had to fight to keep it. They survived a Vandal blockade at the Battle of the Nervassas Mountains in 419, launched these really ambitious plundering raids into Lusitania by 429, and spent nearly a decade fiercely fighting the native Galaico-Roman population who were actively resisting from ancient Iron Age hill forts. Finally, though, in 438 AD, King Hermeric managed to secure a lasting peace. Now, let's move right along to Phases 2 and 3, Expansion and the Gothic Hammer.
Turns out, that peace was really just a launching pad. Hermeric's son, King Richila, saw a massive Roman power vacuum in the south, and he was absolutely ruthless in exploiting it. In just 8 years, he entirely redrew the map. In 438, he defeats Roman forces on the Genil River, capturing a massive hoard of gold and silver. A year later, he captures Merida, which was the actual administrative capital of Roman Hispania, and briefly makes it his own capital. Then he pushes down into modern Andalusia, taking Murtla and finally the great city of Seville in 441. Rome was so panicked by this that they sent a massive army led by Vidas in 446. Well, Richila completely routed them. Boom. This effectively ended imperial Roman administration in southern Hispania for good.
Richila's successor, Rechiar, took this newfound power to a whole other level. Now, Rechiar holds the distinction of being the first Germanic king in Europe to convert to Catholic Christianity. But hey, don't let the religious conversion fool you. He was a warrior through and through. Turning the other cheek definitely wasn't part of his military strategy. He minted his own coins to project power, married a Visigothic princess, and boldly allied with local Hispano-Roman rebels known as the Bugadai. Together, they relentlessly plundered the Ebro Valley, capturing Zaragoza and Lida, and dragging captives all the way back to Galiacia as serfs. But as we'll see, this aggression would prove to be a fatal miscalculation.
Because that aggression, it triggered a catastrophic collapse. Richiar's raiding finally pushed the Western Roman Emperor, Avitus, over the edge. Avitus ordered the Visigothic King Theodoric II to cross the Pyrenees with a massive coalition. In 456 AD, at the Battle of the Orbigo River, the Suebi were decisively crushed. It was a bloodbath. The Visigoth pursued Richiar, captured him in Porto, and executed him. They brutally sacked the Suebi capital of Braga, burning its churches to the ground. The kingdom immediately shattered into a bloody civil war, with rival factions seizing cities, like the warlord Richimund, who sacked Lugo and just murdered its Roman officials.
And that brings us to the real core of our explainer today. Phase 4, Rimasmund's reunification.
So you really have to wonder, how does any kingdom survive a collapse of that magnitude? The answer is King Rigismund. The contrast of his reign against the previous years is just staggering. Between 459 and 464 AD, the Suebi kingdom was completely fractured, divided along the Minho River by rival warlords like Maldras, Frumar, and Framta. Even the Roman Emperor Majorian tried to capitalize on this weakness to restore Roman authority, though he totally failed to pacify the northwest. The kingdom was literally on life support. But out of the ashes, Rigismund steps up. Through sheer strategic brilliance and pure force of will, he systematically brings these warring, fragmented factions back together under one single crown by 464 AD. He doesn't just stabilize the kingdom, he instantly weaponizes it.
And here's the wild part. Once Resumund reunified the factions, he didn't just sit behind his borders to rebuild. He went on an immediate, terrifying offensive to project Suebic's strength. In 468 AD, he marches south, completely destroys the defensive walls at Canimbriga, and actually takes the surviving inhabitants as slaves. Riding this insane shock-and-awe momentum, just 1 year later, his forces arrive at the gates of Lisbon. The local Roman leader, Lucidio, is so overwhelmed by the sheer force of this resurgent Suebic army that he just surrenders without even putting up a fight.
Remismund inherited a shattered, burning kingdom divided by warlords, and within 5 years, he had reunited his people and captured one of the most important coastal cities in all of Roman Hispania. The big takeaway here? Remismund provided an absolute masterclass in crisis leadership, basically single-handedly securing the survival of the Suebi for another entire century.
Okay, finally, let's look at Phase 5, the Visigothic conquest.
After Remismund, the kingdom entered this bizarre 80-year period of historical obscurity. But when they finally re-emerge in the mid-6th century, the Catholic Suebi are on a direct collision course with the Arian Visigothic king Luvagild, and this fierce religious divide created an irreconcilable ideological rift that made coexistence practically impossible. Luvagild was an absolute master of using minor provocations as a pretext for war. For instance, when the Suebic king Miro launched a military expedition against the local tribe called the Runcones in 572, Luvagild used this as his justification to start tightening the noose around Galicia. He systematically dismantles the Suebi warders year by year. In 573, he takes Sambaria. In 574, Contrabia. By 575, he invades the Aragonesian mountains, capturing the city of Orense and its local lord, Aspidius. And by 576, Luvagild has marched his armies right up to the Douro River, forcing King Miro to sign a desperate, temporary peace.
From there, the final dominoes fall incredibly fast. In 583, a Visigothic prince rebelled against his father, Luvagild. King Miro saw a chance to break the Visigothic stranglehold and marched to Seville to help the rebellion, but it was a total disaster. Miro was surrounded, forced to submit, and died shortly after. The very next year, a Suebic noble named Audica violently usurped the throne from Miro's son. For Luvagild, this was the ultimate casus belli, the perfect excuse for total war. In 585 AD, the Visigoths launched a massive, unstoppable invasion. Audica was defeated, the royal treasure was seized, and Galicia was permanently annexed as the 6th Visigothic province.
176. That is exactly how many years this kingdom stood. 176 years of independent Suebic rule, crashing to a definitive end. From crossing the Pyrenees as a migrating coalition to capturing Roman capitals, surviving brutal civil wars, miraculously reunifying under Remismund, and finally being swallowed up by the Visigoths.
So, what does this all mean for us today? Well, it leaves us with a really fascinating question to end on. How much of the Roman world was actually shaped by the kingdoms we completely forgot about? The Suebi might have been annexed, but for nearly 2 centuries, their military strategies, their religious conversions, and their relentless survival instinct permanently altered the landscape of Western Europe. It really makes you wonder, what other incredible stories are hiding in the shadows of the Dark Ages, just waiting to be explored?